the 30th of May 2022. I'm Dana Durnford, your host tonight. I hope you're doing reasonable in these difficult times. What are they going to do with the nuclear industry? Put them in rockets and shoot them at the sun or something? Dan, you're thinking of nuclear fuel. No, I'm talking about the pro-nuclear. They're crazies. My goodness, they're crazy. It never stops with this lot. There was a headline just come out, and we'll cover it next show. This is United Kingdom cancer. They're talking about some kind of cure for cancer. You'll laugh too when I show you. It's not a good laugh. It's a gallows laugh. Immensely exciting novel treatment for developing tumors, nuclear. Really, that's a new treatment? I thought it just murdered people. I didn't know you can treat people. If you scroll down, you see the statement here. The UK is in a prime position to benefit from the development, because we're talking about nuclear waste for cancer treatment. So then they say the UK is in a prime position to benefit from the development if it becomes real, in the use of nuclear waste, given the large supply it has in the country. So the United Kingdom is planning on getting rid of its nuclear waste by sticking it into your children and your friends and your families and your loved ones. My God, man. That's what that story is about. It's about using nuclear waste, target alpha therapy, aka death by radiation. So this is what you get when they're unchecked. It's just a matter of time before they drive around and jump out of the car and run up and stab you. That's coming. It'll be legal for them to do it. If they're a nuclear scientist, they'll be allowed to stab children on the side of the road. That's the future of this batshit out of control planet. The IAEA, everybody in the IAEA should be put in a rocket and sent to the sun so they don't contaminate the solar system. This is Raphael Grossi. He's the current, I don't even know what to call him anymore. I don't know what to call these people anymore. Well, you can't call them people, Dana. You got to have certain attributes to be a person. This is what you expect from somebody in the nuclear industry, running around sniffing bicycle seats, usually children's, no doubt. Where was the International Atomic Energy? Now in 15 days is the 11th anniversary of Canada removing all restrictions from Japan. 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures. Canada's like, oh, ship it over here. Let's give everybody heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. I don't know. You can't. It's hard to accept that Canada lifted restrictions after 93 days. 11th anniversary. So Canada's doomed for sure, right? Everybody is just destroyed with up to 1,800 illnesses you'll get before cancer. But don't feel bad if you eat food from around a nuclear power plant. You can join the list too. I was trying to tell somebody about that yesterday, and they're like, nah, nobody would do that. And I was like, okay. Don't look it up for yourself on Google, though. Just don't use Google. Use something else. They're so crazy they grow food right alongside of 1-ton bags of nuclear waste. Try making that up on your own. Canada's like, hey, ship it over here if nobody else will take it. We hate Canada. Thanks a lot, Grossy. You're a real peach. This is the strangest headline to show up, isn't it? Another earthquake could topple Fukushima nuclear reactor. Now, there was a headline several years ago. It was just nonsense in the story, unfortunately. But the headline was another earthquake could topple Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean. Fukushima nuclear plant could fall directly into the Pacific Ocean. And that got a lot of traction, but it was full of Caldecott and Gunderson and Busby propaganda, right? And so there was a couple of stories from the major medias that showed up. Another earthquake, and this is Reactor, the remains of Reactor. That's a 90-foot building right there behind him. Hang on. You like this? So the top of that gray section there is the actual remains of Reactor 4 in Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. And that's supposed to be 190 feet high. There's such a... Because they're actually talking about Reactor 1 in this story. We'll get to it in a little tiny bit. It's nuclear, so there's so much coming at you each day. Somewhere between 100 and 165 nuclear stories in a 24-hour cycle that I can find. And because we're moving shop and house, I haven't been able to do very much, right? And so at the end of the day, I browsed through some of the news cycle. And we'll get back up to speed maybe in a week or something. I'm still, I'm going to be 4 or 5 days behind. It's going to be April or June the 4th or something before I actually get in there. I'm old and busted up, and I can't do things anymore like a young man can, right? And it's a struggle. Holy cow. What a struggle today was yesterday and the day before. Just kind of lose faith in humanity. Ah, yes, the paper suits. Look at this paper. Look at the crest of the paper suit. And the TEPCO says they burn around 7,000 of these paper suits each day. And by the way, a paper suit can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown. Like, your paper suit got to be about 8 times thicker than the sheets of steel they're stood on. Actually, that won't even protect you from the neutron bombardment. Here we go with the old pointing the finger routine. And those gloves, if you touch anything with those gloves on, they'll split. It's most likely photoshopped, and I don't know why. And look at Buddy. He looks like there's an ape, and they put a paper suit on an ape. Just look at the way his whole body is. Like, me freak up, man. Ooh, like, who the hell stands like this? It's the strangest pose, eh? Can you hold your hand up a little higher? We're trying to get a picture to fool the planet. And so you can see the gap between the remains of Reactor 4. Yeah, so the top of that gray section, you like this. The top of that gray section is at the top of that pile of wreckage you see right there. Now she's going to pretend that she's at the fuel pool. This is Reactor 3. It's the same as Reactor 4, where these are 190-foot buildings. And the fuel pools, there's 2 of them at the very top of the buildings. Now she's going to pretend she's at the fuel pool. So this one's already toppled over. Let's play it up because it's entertaining to see the strangeness of the medias.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster. We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi.
That's okay, so are they. Look at that. They've done the same thing with Reactor 3, where there's just this little stump left. And then they pretend they're inside of that. So that one's toppled over already. Reactor 4's toppled over already. Arnie Gunnison made the assemblies for the fuel pool. He doesn't know. He thinks the pool looks like the one, and so does Helen Caldercott, like the ones to your left instead of what it actually looks like to the right. And so you can see the gap between the building that physically doesn't touch each other. This is all done with dead homeless, which is why we got Pole tonight. Where are you two, Pole? Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with nuclear university students? Somebody actually voted no? Must have been a mistake. It's got to be a mistake. No, nobody could be that stupid and vote no, could they? Is that possible? Nah, that can't be possible. Surely the goodness that... Nah, nobody could be so stupid as to vote no, could they? Should the homeless... Yeah, look at that, 12%. Nah. That's Google fudging the numbers. It's got to be. Nobody can be that stupid to vote no. Why wouldn't you replace the homeless with university students? I guess it don't matter. The homeless are much smarter than they are anyway. So yeah, they faked... So Reactor 3 toppled over. Reactor 4 already toppled over, as I showed you. Here's another fun one. France has half of its nuclear fleet is shut down. I'm laughing because everybody refers to France as the jewel of the nuclear genocide industry. Half of France's 56 reactors are offline, aka broken down. Oh, this story came out just before we went live. Mini nuclear power stations. Now, they're being very polite when they say may produce more waste than larger ones. This was a study. Well, large ones produce a lot of waste too. And they grow food in the nuclear wasteland and ship it worldwide. So Japan is now a nuclear waste. Hang on. Small modular reactors may produce a higher volume. They actually don't even exist, of course, but the whole world is just fawning over something that doesn't exist. Greater complexity of radioactive waste. Where's the numbers to? So small modular reactors could increase the volume of short-lived, low and intermediate level waste, and short being compared to 15 million years, the two lowest of the three categories, by up to 35 times more intermediate level waste, and 30 times more long-lived waste, and 5 times more fuel. This is a study out of Stanford, of all places. Completely confused by it. Because they usually... They don't usually have a descending voices from these institutes. They're usually all hands on deck. Japan is shaken by a magnitude 6.0 earthquake. That was the 24th. And this was from an earthquake. This was a week after that earthquake. It was still showing up in the medias. And it was 16 kilometers deep south-southeast of Katsura, Japan, which is unusual because they normally only give you the latitude now for the last 3 years or so. When they used to tell you how far off the city and how deep it was, now they just give you latitude. It was around 30 kilometers deep. It was another earthquake. That's the same one we covered last week. It registered lower of 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7, which is the same one Taiwan uses. It is meant to deflect, right? Because if you just see the headline, it doesn't seem like such a bad earthquake. But if you actually understand that you got to multiply it, because you're talking about a 5.5 or lower, you got to multiply it by 1.428 to actually get to scale it up to an international scale, and then that's a big earthquake, then, see? So same thing on 25th, it showed up again. That's really interesting, anyway. And they show you a picture of Reactor 4 just after the event, after the catastrophic extinction level event started out. Our last video on criminals Ernie and Megat Gunnarsson never got no views for days and days. It was totally restricted. People were watching it, but it wouldn't register views or thumbs up and stuff like that. The nuclear industry is terrified of anybody having a conversation. Man, it's the damnedest thing. South Korea says they're not going to lift the Fukushima seafood import ban. But they'll go ahead and poison everybody by buying the food from all the prefectures. So South Korea and China is helping Japan. They're obviously working with Japan. Okay, so another earthquake could topple Fukushima nuclear reactors. One of the melted down nuclear reactors, journalists. Should newspapers hire journalists? Obviously, there's none on the planet to hire, Dana. They're just public relation firms now. And I mean that. That's the world you live in. There is no journalism anymore. There's public relation firms only. And the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station is resting precariously on a fragile frame of corroded support. And by the way, they got the fuel out of reactor 3 and 4 out of the pools that don't exist. Try making that up on your own. I got to show you that one more time because I guess it doesn't matter. Let's keep it rolling. Where the hell did too much on my computer? That's the problem with nuclears. Besides they're crazies, right? So reactor 4 already toppled over. Reactor 3 toppled over. And the radioactive fallout from those have already contaminated the entire planet. And this is a 40-day model from NOAA of the radioactive fallout. Because the reactors toppled, right? Caught fire and blew up, caught fire, and all that good stuff. So you can see this model runs for 40 days. The plume, as you can see, it's a continuous plume coming out, eventually covers the entire planet. And that's why you don't have to clean insects off your windshields anymore. topple over by the next strong earthquake, which is any minute because Japan has around 5,000 a year. The nuclear power plants in Japan are built in the most vulnerable spots on the coastlines. It's a lunatic industry, isn't it? Interior of the stricken reactor is too radioactive for humans to enter. And they put the word safely as if you can go in there. You physically can't go in there because you'll die from the neutron burst, the gamma shines, the x-rays and stuff like that before you can actually get near it, right? They're true Medusas. But a remote control robotic camera has sent back pictures from the number 1 reactor. One of the 3, there was actually 4 melted down, not 3. And like, because they're pretending reactor 4 didn't lose its inventory. When you're doing maintenance, you don't take all the fuel out of the reactor unless you're doing a refit. You're talking about hot fuel, it's very long to transfer just a little bit of fuel out. It's a huge process. Fukushima reactor is sitting on shaky base, raises quake concerns. This is a major propaganda from Japan right there. Government-sanctioned propaganda. You can't call it media, but you'll actually, because you get complacent, you'll start calling it media, but they're not actual medias. I don't know how to describe them. They're some weird alien species for sure. So they're pretending this is holding up the reactor core. If there's an earthquake, everything's going to fall. It's already gone. Reactor 1... Reactor 1. Okay, so let's talk about Reactor 1 for a minute, I guess. Or 2 or 3 or whatever. Or 4 or 5. Where are you to? Reactor 1. Here we go. It wasn't like the other ones. And they're all crazies. Now they're claiming there's 1 sievert an hour or something. Alrighty, here we go. So melt through was confirmed. That's November the 30th, 2011. Up to 1 million sieverts outside of the Unit 1 containment vessel. Still too hot to attempt measuring other areas. Still too hot. You basically can't get on the site. This is what he sent in helicopters and why they had to turn back, right? TEPCO is a perpetual liar. International Atomic Energy Agency, which is just a corporation, a subsidy of United Nations, which is 195 militaries. They're nobody's friend, including themselves. A crazy death cult known as the International Atomic Energy Agency informed in March that the number 1 reactor core started melting 50 minutes after the earthquake and before the tsunami. And because the earthquake tilted or moved the country like 6 or 7 feet to the east, and it tore the water pipes apart. I mean, if you go look at the footage of Tokyo, all the buildings swaying for about 6 minutes. There's some pretty crazy stuff. 680 kilometers of the coastline was washed away. So there wasn't, a lot of that earthquake damage was washed out to the ocean. 2,000 square miles of it was washed out into the ocean right away. But the footage in Tokyo, like 220 kilometers away, the buildings just swayed for 6 minutes. It's impossible to bolt of melted fuel is in the Unit 1 containment. Charred vessel could indicate explosive event inside of Reactor 1. Yeah, Reactor 1 blew up and caught fire and burnt for several days. And when we're talking, and then it went China syndrome. Well, the fuel pool detonated. The fuel pool actually detonated, blew up. And where's the explosion to that too? Let me see. We got the video of that. Sometimes. That's Reactor 3, Dana. Where's Reactor 1? Because I get them backwards sometimes, don't I?
The greatest threat to public health.
That's not it. Yeah, well, it's Monday. What do you expect? Here we go. Just bear with me, I'm just double checking it. Yeah, that's Reactor 1. So this reactor, you can see it in the background with the Kevlar sarcophagus removed. I'll do that again for you. What did I do now? Oh, here we go, my mistake. This is Reactor 1 detonating. This was a 190-foot building. So there goes the fuel pool. See it? Oh, that's Reactor 3. How do I get that backwards? I wonder. Let me try this again. This is Reactor 1, the other Reactor 1. Right, so one more time for Reactor 1. Boom. See that? One more time. Wow. And so the fuel pool was gone right away. And then there was not all of it. Some of it still was blown down into the building. That caught fire because it was no longer underwater. That could have been a reactor core or more. Because they keep deck-edge reactor cores in the fuel pools because you don't have a repository anywhere, right? But that's their official story is that the fuel is, some of the fuel is fell down to the base. These reactors were 720 tons. It's huge machines. Alarm bells are sounding over signs. The heavily damaged structure. Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant may be too flimsy to withstand another major earthquake. Well, it was completely destroyed now, wasn't it? And it's hard to appreciate it, what really happened here. Unit 2 alongside were completely liquefied. 3 and 4 went off like firecrackers and dispersed decades of reactor cores. That's not what I'm looking for. It does that sometimes where I can't get... large portions of the concrete base supporting the pressure vessel appears to have melted. Leaving only a metal framework holding up the pressure vessels. And they usually weigh like 1 million pounds. So the framework they're showing us is not going to hold up 1 million pounds. And then the reactor core is 1.6 million pounds or something, 720 tons. So now you're talking about 2.5 million pounds is going to get held up by a couple of thin pieces of metal. This is ludicrous talk. Because they won't admit the fuel is gone. See? Who cares, right? Large portions of the base supporting the pressure vessel appears to have melted, leaving only a metal framework holding up 2.5 million pounds. These are crazies. I don't understand why that story came out. It's confusing. What are they up to? They're up to something. We'll figure it out in the next couple of weeks, I bet you. The crazies are now saying the remaining structure may not be strong enough to withstand an earthquake. It's a troubling prediction given the region's been hit by a number of strong, and they use the word tremor. That's something we've seen lately they've been doing. And inbreed with the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, instead of universities and academics, who's handling the decommissioning work. That's right, not scientists, not nuclear academics, not nuclear corporations. No. Homeless. Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with nuclear university students? Somebody's spamming us. Look at that. We got 16% of 32 lousy votes. Bless your hearts now, mind you. I'm just saying because I'm restricted, right? Chairman of Nuclear Regulation Authority in Japan. His nickname is Two Dogs. You can kind of guess. We remain concerned about whether it will withstand a strong quake. Like, they've had so many quakes. I've lost count a decade ago. They had 1,000 aftershocks, major ones, right after the original one. I wonder what they're up to. That's the real question. The Fukushima plant went into, and they got triple meltdowns. So you got to go find the word nuclear. Triple nuclear reactor meltdown. That's how the sentence normally would be read, but we don't live in normal times, of course. What looked like a pile of melted fuel on top of the framework. Well, it can't be a pile left. The building blew up at supersonic speeds. Officials believe the meltdown. It didn't melt down, it detonated. And so it ejected the fuel pools. I guess it did melt down. The reactor core appears to have what didn't burn and go directly into the atmosphere and circling the planet. Some of it did go China syndrome, is what I'm saying, right? And that split the Earth when it hit the water table, and the steam was coming out of the ground in 6 places confirmed at 10 sieverts per hour. But of course, it's a hard topic to explain to people who are not really familiar with this. So 10 sieverts is a lethal dose. So the steam coming out of the ground covers the whole site. So you're talking millions of sieverts. Like, you're talking about a huge plume, visible plume, months later, years later, where the steam's coming out. And it has so much energy. It's 10 sieverts an hour in 6 places, where the China syndrome is ejecting the lethal gases, and they're only visible in certain conditions, right? But it's always happening. That's why the homeless are there. Nuclear scientists are afraid to go there. They just they can't seem to get out of bed when it's time to go. A fiscal 2016 estimate by the International Research Institute for Nuclear Decommissioning said that the seismic resistance of the structure would not be an issue even if 1/4 of the base was structurally compromised, along with other damage to the interior of the Research Institute for Nuclear Decommissioning, who refuses to acknowledge Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 were completely destroyed, and the fuel pools were a long time dispersed into the entire ecosystem of the biosphere. A former senior researcher at what is now Japan's Atomic Energy Agency, they'll probably end up getting a Nobel Prize because they're so whacked, offered an even scarier possibility. He's noting that the interior of the base lies directly under the reactor core. So now they're claiming the reactor core is there. And then, of course, they're claiming the fuel pool is above it. Which means you're talking about 10 million pounds or something sitting on those little tiny pieces of metal. I can't figure out how they can tie their own shoes, to tell you the truth. Noting the interior of the base lies directly under the reactor core, under Medusa itself. Possibility of piping hot nuclear fuel flowed into the interior. Flowed. You should go check out that explosion, buddy. Well, their job is not to tell the truth. Anything but the truth is acceptable. That is a particularly worrisome thought in light of the fact that Kuwait, with a seismic intensity of upper 6, because Japan has a scale of 7 instead of a scale of 10, see? So if they say 6.5 earthquake, most people, it's 6.5. But it's actually a 9.4 on Japan, on the international scale, see? They do that on purpose to downplay to the world what's really going on. Because it releases radioactive plumes like the one we got now. Another strong quake could cause the pressure vessel to topple over. And so the stories try to convince you the pressure vessel exists. That's probably what's going on. And that they're going to have to go ahead and take the fuel out of it before an earthquake topples it over, see? So then everybody got to give them a couple of $1 billion so they can get the job done. And like they done this with Reactor 4 where you had all these so-called experts worldwide coming out of... Number 4 goes is, bye-bye Japan, you should evacuate the coastline of North America. David Suzuki, right? And sure enough, 2013, they come out and claim beautiful pictures during the reactor building that doesn't exist. Super hard cases. Because they had an upper 6 and a maximum intensity scale of 7, which is a 9.4 on the Richter scale. Hit off the coast of Fukushima Prefecture. February 2021 and March 2022. So that's a really interesting connotation where the upper 6 in Japan's seismic intensity scale is 7. But so unless the tectonic plates let go, that's when you're going to get the tsunami, right? But that has to happen for 180 kilometers or something, or miles, to get a huge tsunami that will... Like you can do a localized tsunami with explosives or a nuclear bomb, but that's just a localized one, right? This one had multiple tsunamis, which meant the tectonic plates had let go. The Australians, of course, everything is on a paywall. Australia is the one. They're just, the government down there is, wow. That's not a spot you would want to go live, let alone take a vacation. Another earthquake could topple Fukushima reactors. They're talking about number 1. So the big push now is to get the fuel out of Reactor 1, which doesn't exist, of course. That's what they're probably up to. We'll see in the next couple of weeks, I bet you. Nuke contaminated water from Fukushima may be out of sight, but should never be out of one's mind. The Global Times, which is China. In 2011, the 311, as it's known, earthquake in Japan caused a meltdown, not nuclear meltdown of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant reactor core. It was 4 of them. That we can, and now there's a lot of evidence that came out last year suggested the common spin fuel pool is gone, which collects fuel from all the reactor cores, the 6 reactor cores. And there's also evidence showing that reactor 6 probably melted down. And the Dini, which is the number 2, the ugly twin, unleashing enormous amounts of radioactive materials. That's being pretty polite about it. The operator of the plant, which is not a decommission authority, Tokyo Electric Power Company, was nationalized right away because it went bankrupt, decided to pour in seawater because they never had an option. It wasn't them, it was the military at this stage, to cool the reactor and contain the leakage. I showed you the pictures earlier. That's why I'm laughing. Because, let me do you a favor. I'll show you a picture, 2 pictures, front and back, of reactor 3 and 4. This is the following couple of days. I'll put it on the big screen. So this is the ocean side looking in. Reactor 3 to your right, the remains of reactor 4 to your left. These were 190-foot buildings gutted. Now if you're looking out towards the ocean, the other side, you can see the symmetrical destruction, right? So reactor 4 is on your left on this one and on the right on this one. And so they're claiming that they plugged the leak in these buildings, is what this assertion, and contained the leakage. And because the used seawater became highly contaminated with radioactive material, TEPCO put it in storage tanks. Like, this is crazy talk. You know, there was only a handful of people on that site after the detonations, right? And there was no tanks there to put it in, and you can pour in, first off, when you pour salt water, or you say if you detonate a nuclear weapon underwater, the sulfur in the salt water is liberated and has this unique effect at high temperatures where it becomes a spherical ball with a structure kind of like a soccer ball, but it's able to ingest alphas and neutrons and betas and gamma emitters, isotopes, and now they're called super hot particles. They're easily liberated back into the environment. They're not soluble in water, and they like to hang out close to the ground, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. So just exterminating all the species. A decade on, the daily amount of 150 tons of seawater used for the reactor is accumulated to an over. So what they're talking about, they were using. So 100. If you use a garden hose, it's 24 hours. That's 122 tons. So they're saying basically is they used a 3/8 garden hose or half-inch garden hose, say, on 4 melted reactor buildings, and they collected the water and put it in tanks. And they come up with that story 2015, basically, with the Paris Accord, where the whole industry got together in France and conspired to promote nuclear as a save-all. According to the estimates by the Japan Center for Economic Research, it'll cost $400 to $550 billion to scrap and decontaminate the reactors. So think about that statement. So 400 to 550 billion. Most of that 400 to 550 billion, about 400 to 500 billion, the bulk of it goes to the treatment of the contaminated water. This is a ludicrous assertion, of course, because there was three systems. There was a Surrey system, which allegedly reclaimed cesium isotopes, gamma. There was the Areva system, which was France's system. And then there was also the ALPS system. Now, the problem with both of these systems were they didn't work. I'll show you a quick intro to that kind of information. I got entire presentations in my playlist on that. Here we go. And they done other stuff, right? Might as well bring that up where we're here. All right, so 2014, TEPCO to abandon the Areva system. For the last 3 years, the system been unused and kept out of operation. So the Areva system didn't work, and what they found out when they turned it on, it was so radioactive they couldn't get near it again. So they turned it off, but that was the end of it. And so the same thing with the ALPS system, 2014. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. It actually has yet to function. There was a whole bunch of other... This was all meant to make people think they weren't contaminating the ocean, right? That's what this was all about. Even though they were, this was a well-orchestrated public relation. So 2014, TEPCO says groundwater bypass operations not having an effect. TEPCO also failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence to restrict the contamination from leaking into the Pacific. Again, when you look at the models from all the different countries worldwide originally, this was one of the models, a 20-day model where the planet was covered in radioactive fallout. There's many of them models from different institutions worldwide, and studies now back up those models to quantify the assertions in them. TEPCO's ice wall operation not working, the fence is not working, the bypass operation not working, the Areva system's not working, the ALPS system is not working, the ice wall's not working. And they had 260,000 people to build the ice wall. It was and the numbers they located for the ice wall, instead of a real wall, why build a real wall when you can get 260,000 people $1,000 check each? Because if you gave 260,000 people $1,000 each, there was no money left to build the ice wall. So nobody's bothered explaining how they pulled that off. How did they pay 260,000 people and build a wall, ice wall, which is huge maintenances, and then why not build a real wall? Is that stupid or something to build a real wall? So this is the most expedient, cost-effective, trouble-saving ways to dump the nuclear waste directly into the ocean. So this way it only costs $13 to $27 million instead of the bulk of the $400 to $550 billion. This is the Chinese. Now China knows what's going on. China's not stupid. China's not gullible. Monitoring data collected in 2012 show the concentrations, and again, when you hear them only acknowledging gammas like cesium, then that's the misdirection, right? Because nuclear meltdown, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is curium. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is named after the devil. And so 100,000 becquerels is not, it wasn't per cubic meter, it was per cubic centimeter. Japanese government, aka TEPCO, repeatedly claimed the nuclear contaminated water is safe to be dumped. So this is the distraction, is we're going to dump it, not that we already dumped it. So the ideas of the tanks was to, because you can fill up those tanks 6 times a day with the normal operation. We go through multiple multi-nuclide removal systems, aka the ALPS. And the only one left is going to be the tritium. Of course, tritium doesn't come from nuclear reactors, tritium-3H, right? 2 neutrons and a proton. And so they refuse to even acknowledge that. Hard cases. And tritium-3H is carcinogenic, but it also does debilitating illnesses for children. Japanese government has not held any briefing or hearings for the public in order to justify the dumping plan. Japanese government. Nuclear industry. The nuclear industry contacted citizens and groups to ask them to stop using words like nuclear contaminated water and use nuclear treated water. This was a well-greased public relation. Vigorous public relation efforts have been carried out to whitewash the plan. That was mighty nice of them. The money has been used on professional teams to weaken and remove negative public opinions in Japan and abroad. So there's a lot of money to silence someone like myself, even if it's just where they fudge the numbers. People still watch, but the numbers don't reflect it. But it influences some people that are new because they don't see the large numbers, right? I don't want to care about that. Because a lot of people are very gullible, where they think unless it got a lot of views, then it's not. The more views it got, the more credibility a lot of people give it, which is, unfortunately, that's a serious mistake. And it brought about nuclear contaminated water through various propaganda programs. That's being really polite, by the way. 1 week after 2011 nuclear accident, when experts, and don't go there, has already made the judgment that the cores of Unit 1 to 3 of the Fukushima, it was actually 4, the Daiichi nuclear power plants had melted. The company still refuses to announce the truth to the public, instead chose to use core damage. And core damage is a term that was significantly less alarming. And according to a research model established for the ocean research Kiel, half of the Pacific Ocean would be polluted in less than 57 days if nuclear contaminated water is dumped at the speed announced by Japan. And the dumped nuclear contaminated water would reach the west coast of the United States 6 months later. And the entire Asia Pacific will be permeated because of the monsoon currents. Well, I'll show you 3 models. This is a Norwegian Institute for Air Research model. This is not 6 months. This is airborne 19 days later, 468 hours. Yeah, 468 hours. This one, that was 19 days. This one is 20-day model of the radioactive fallout. And this one is CEA. I can't remember who they are off the top of my head. This is France's government's modeling of the venting, not the actual inventories that were lost. And this is a 16-day model. Read it and weep. The whole planet covered in continuous plume, all oceans, all fresh water, all communities, all cities. And so it's really interesting they're talking about. Okay, so Canada, didn't see this one coming. For Montreal area mayors, Montreal is the biggest province in Canada. Nuclear waste facility near Ottawa still a no-no. Nuclear waste. So they're talking about Chalk River. Ottawa River is a major source of drinking water for people in the Montreal region, which is the next province. So it's a major drinking supply for Toronto for 4 million people, but also many Americans. In 2018, dozens of mayors with the Montreal metropolitan community unanimously adopted a motion to oppose the development of a permanent nuclear waste disposal site in Chalk River, Ontario, about 180 kilometers northeast of Ottawa, which is the capital. Disposal facility would be under the control of the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, which is a private consortium, which is actually an American, runs the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, which is a private consortium with the first meltdown, I think, on the planet was Chalk River. And they applied last year to grout the remains of the reactors because they can't decommission it. And there's been a lot of propaganda about it. It could contaminate what is the source of drinking water for millions of people. It's actually tens of millions because the Americans drink that water too, right? The facility will be operational for 50 years, and its potential effects on the river would be monitored for 500 years. Like Donneray in the United Kingdom was a reprocessing site. It's closed now because they used to dump their nuclear waste down into a deep mine shaft he dug on the site. But anyway, it's going to take them around 300 years to decommission the site. It's right in the middle of a community, right on top of that. And who's going to be around in 300 years, or in this case 500 years, to keep an eye on the crazies? Nobody. Nobody can guarantee that something can be safeguarded for 500 years. Problem with nuclear fuel rods and stuff like this in particular, their effect on whatever medium you put them in is what's known as a one of the connotations for is a Wigner effect. And what the Wigner does is it breaks down the integrity of cement or steel and makes it brittle. So if you, when it comes to nuclear, that's bad, really bad. A history of radioactive decay. Who really messed up the UK nuclear industry? Welcome to Nuclear Island 1. Safety starts here. When you got to put safety at your entrance, then you're in the wrong business. United Kingdom has no nuclear power stations completed, which is an interesting framing. In the United Kingdom, since Sizewell B, which is going to close down this month or something. Sizewell B started in 1976, 45 years ago, yeah? So, 1995, the country's nuclear fleet is now in desperate need of replacement. But why? Because all of these places are in farmland, which is madness. A failure of successive governments since the 1970s. No. You had a meltdown at Sellafield in the 50s. That was basically the end of the nuclear renaissance. They managed to get a few more out, but that set the stage. And so United Kingdom has the biggest death in the United Kingdom is cancer, rather. Because United Kingdom have been polluted by the nuclear industry. Brutal pollution of United Kingdom. So today came out Hinkley Point B owners, which is EDF, which is France, tells the staff reactors will be shut down in the summer despite concerns of blackout later in the year. They're closing down Sizewell B's 2 reactors. So they show you this picture by the ocean, right? And if you go look it up, you'll see they're building Sizewell C at the same spot. And this is the future Sizewell C. It's the same as Sizewell B, surrounded by farms. Hard cases. That's Hinkley Point B, rather. Yeah, Hinkley Point B. Which is the future Hinkley Point C is built in farmlands too. Hinkley Point B. Yeah, construction began in 1967. It took them 9 years to build the disease factory. Because it's surrounded by farms, right? Surrounded by farms. Wonderful farms. Anyway, looks like we got spammed in the poll tonight. Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with nuclear university students? Doesn't that make sense? Because universities, the school of mass destructions, created this stuff in the first place. So shouldn't they be the ones who work on it? They created it. The students are full of energy. Let them go figure it out. The homeless are not going to figure it out. Okay, bear with me then. Bear with me. Can the homeless decommission multiple nuclear meltdowns? And with TEPCO in charge. So the idea of TEPCO is, instead of blaming the nuclear industry, you're going to blame TEPCO, see? Which is the wrong thing to do, right? Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Scroll, and the wrong one doesn't help. Hang on. So, I'll show you why I'm asking that question, I suppose. Does that make sense? Dana, why do you think the homeless are there and not nuclear scientists? Well, it's not a hunch. Let me put it that way. Hang on. Oh, everything hurts. I mean, everything in my body hurts. I'm busted up bad. I'm old, might as well admit it now. Old and busted up and broken. But we got to keep trying for the sake of humanity, the species. Somebody has to keep trying, I guess. But my goodness, everything hurts. My whole body hurts like it's really something. I got the plywood on the shelter last night, and I got the cover on it, but I forgot to put the tarp underneath it, so it didn't chafe, right? So this morning I had to go and take the tarp off it, the plywood, and then, hang on, I'm still looking for the documentation. I'll get it. So that's okay. because I had to get strapping that secure it so it's not flapping all the time. And freaking price of wood has gone crazy. There we go. I think we're in this section. I went too far because I'm talking again. Hang on. Well, that's the only problem with Dana is I got so much, too much time on my hand. So the helicopters couldn't go there. And they're sending the homeless. It's time to make a geezer suicide squad. So obviously they're not referring to nuclear students. TEPCO admits it's going to run out of homeless in about 5 years. Tokyo Vice Governor suggested the Fukushima draft. All of Japan must face it. Face what? Well, those 60 and older should prepare to die at the nuclear meltdown. Now, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's easier than screaming. It's more friendly on everybody's ears, I hope. 60 and older should prepare to die, not the nuclear students. Which is why we got a poll, right? Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with nuclear university students? And all of eastern Japan evacuated. Fukushima plant was evacuated.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying.
So send us people who don't mind dying. Do you think they were talking about nuclear students, nuclear universities? All the nuclear academics stoically stepped up. I just fucking with you, sorry. Even Forbes, crazy lunatic Forbes. This is outrageous. Homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work on Fukushima. Even Forbes like, whoa, we're crazy, but these guys are lunatics. Temporary workers fighting to repair crippled. I showed you pictures earlier. Calling these places crippled that's wrong. UN official, even the crazy UN says homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die, not nuclear scientists. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima. They're often given second-hand radiation paper suits. When they call them radiation suits, that should be a crime on its own. Calling paper suits radiation suits. Hard cases, eh? The unskilled and destitute are targets for Fukushima cleanup, not nuclear academics, nuclear students. They can't even read. That kind of sounds like nuclear students. Mentally disabled are working at Fukushima. Homeless are treated like disposable people, which has got me to thinking hang on. Oh, I see what I got done there. No, I don't. Hang on. Oh, okay, I got you now. What I got done. Here we go. 2 Danas. I'll get rid of one. There we go. Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with the nuclear university students? I kind of think it's a good idea, but seniors are sought for frontline radiation cleanup in Japan. Help wanted ads for Fukushima nuclear meltdown seeks employees that could carry out a conversation. Oh, so that's why there's no nuclear students or academics there. Oh, that makes sense. Some people haven't even get food, got no place to go. Co-workers are tempered and they use violence. TEPCO raises the safe limits to 500 times the original level. Well, why would you do that for? Fukushima worker. Imagine nuclear scientists making a YouTube video talking about Fukushima. He said, I wanted to escape the nuclear plant, but feared they might hurt me. I'm a nuclear scientist. And at parties we were forced to eat radioactive mushrooms and bee larvae gathered inside. And you can imagine nuclear scientists, they called my mother to tell her I was in trouble. This is what happened. That's what happened, baby. Workers are tricked to being on the front line. Does that sound like nuclear scientist to anybody? Fukushima workers filmed at the plant, underage people employed. Fukushima workers, aka the homeless, the mentally retarded, victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language, we felt like kamikaze pilots. Fukushima victims threatened we were punished if we tried to resist. Can you imagine nuclear scientists getting in public television? Said, we were punished if we tried to resist TEPCO. You get where I'm coming to, right? I mean, radiation covered the whole planet. What have I got done here? Okay, let's get on with it. Well, that's about it for... I'm not sure what to say, folks. I'm way behind schedule. I can't keep up with everything, so I can only do the best I can each day. And I'm so busted up. Everything hurts. Well, the good thing about this is it's not going to last. It's not going to last forever. Hopefully, my life will get back to some kind of norm soon. It's horrible right now. Well, I'm just worried that there's no one to come out and have a conversation, which is pretty disappointing. I always felt I would educate a lot of people, and a few of them would pick up and start having a conversation, right? I felt a lot of bloggers would find me and would incorporate some of this into their narrative. Fantasy dreams. Dana and his fantasy dreams. So another earthquake could topple the Fukushima nuclear reactor. I don't know. What the hell do I know anymore? I know I'm censored. The censorship on me is really something, isn't it? The censorship on me is wow stuff. We're going to close down the poll here. We got 51 votes. That's pretty darn good. We got 46 likes. That's a bit of a miracle. I'm censored pretty heavy. Should the homeless be replaced at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site with people who know stuff about nuclear? I thought it was a good idea. The industry freaked out and spammed me. Oh, why wouldn't you replace the homeless with nuclear scientists or students? How could that be a bad idea? Stop spamming my site. Go start up your YouTube channel, come out and debunk me. Instead of doing that to me. don't you go get a real job instead of chasing me and bothering me anyway? It's not like you're going to drive me away or something, right? Anyway, I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow night, hopefully. A long day tomorrow ahead of me. But that's the only way you're going to get it done. You got to go till you drop, right? That's the rule. That's the rule of thumb anyway. Go till you drop. I should have dropped about 2 hours ago by rights. Let's close the poll. Goodbye, poll. 51 votes. That's good stuff. Yeah, the weather's terrible here too. Anyway, we'll see everybody. See everybody tomorrow night, hopefully. They don't hide me away, and yet. Another earthquake could topple Fukushima nuclear reactor. So they're up to no good when they're putting out stories like that. That's the strangest story imaginable. Because this industry is not going to admit any wrong. They won't even acknowledge that somebody died anywhere on the planet from nuclear. And they try to make you believe only cancer can manifest or be diagnosed from this. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and heart problems, liver problems, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, autism, diabetes. Have a great night. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Don't let your children grow up to be pro-nuclear scumbags. Have a great night, folks. God bless.